improve. But I wanted to start what we were talking about before the show, going over what I would describe as this hyperfixation or almost obsession on the 20 miler. When we're dealing with people training for the marathon, it seems like every person I get when we're on the path to a marathon, they have one thought on their mind is, when are we going to run the 20 miler? How many are we going to do? Is it just 20? Are we going to do 22? And I don't think that's inherently a bad thing, but sometimes the way it presents itself is that people aren't as focused or prepared for maybe some of the other things as they are for this famous 20 miler. And we were just kind of talking about, there are some scenarios where that 20 miler is helpful. I think there are far more where it's really not that important. A couple examples, like for people who have run a lot of marathons, you get it to a point once you've run, I don't know how many, but where running that far isn't difficult anymore. Like you've performed that skill successfully several times. So being able to run that 20 for a slow period isn't that important. For people who are stuck at a pace plateau, like I think a lot of us get guys or girls who are trying to qualify for Boston, and maybe they're 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes out, stuck there, and they've been there for a year or two and they can't figure out how to make that next jump. I don't think any of us, that's the path that we would go. Like that's, we're going to be focused on either the shorter races or some threshold or running longer periods at marathon pace, not the slow, long runs. And so, kind of wanted to, go over that and hear your guys' thoughts on what you think about that hyperfixation on the slow, non-specific 20 miler. Nick?
So like with every coaching topic, I think I'm of two minds here, and I think there's a place for the slow 20 miler in a buildup. I think there's a place for easy long runs at different points in the buildup. I think some of this is influenced by the type of athletes that I coach. So I'm coaching a lot of athletes who are between 240 and 310. And so they're able to go out and run, 20 miles within a reasonable amount of time. So for them to go do a 20-mile run, it's not a 3 or 4 hour adventure. For them, it's 2.5 hours, maybe a little bit less on average. So it's different for them than it is for someone who's going to run 4 or 5 hours or even 3.5 hours. But I do like in a marathon cycle, especially early on, if we're working on building up the long run, I really don't mind throwing in an easy 20 in there. Just like, hey, we're going to get some time on feet this weekend. We had a big session on Tuesday, Wednesday. We're going to come back and then we're going to start adding some additional quality to this. Because usually I'm alternating in between like easier long runs and higher quality long runs. I don't always like to throw quality after quality after quality on those sessions. So I'll default to have them do an easy 18 to 20, a couple of times in a cycle. So I don't think it should be the emphasis of a cycle. I don't think it should be the most important run. I don't have athletes do really an easy 22 to 24 or anything like that. Even my more experienced or, more talented athletes, if we're going to go 22, it's a part of a long workout. Like they're doing it as part of a 4x3, or something similar, or a longer marathon tempo run. So I don't like to waste all of those efforts on just an easy 20. I like to make sure we're being intentional about how we do that. But I do understand, because I feel this myself, like the want to have that number or a longer session like that in the plan. I get where they're coming from with it. I've had a ton of athletes bring it out to me. When are we doing 20? When are we going to do 20? Are we going to go 22, 24? And I understand, why they feel that way. And honestly, I more often than not capitulate because I want them to be confident. And I feel a lot of athletes aren't going to be confident if we don't do something like that. Like it won't really matter what I say or the workouts we've done. Like some athletes just aren't going to feel ready until they've done that long session. So we're just going to do it. But it's sometimes hard to get across like, okay, if we do this, like we're probably sacrificing the Tuesday after this, because you're not going to be maybe recovered enough to do a hard session this next Tuesday. And we're not getting as much out of this Sunday session as we could. So it's a tricky question. And I think there's a place for the easy 20 miler. And I think that place really is for athletes who are running 3:30 or faster. And once we get above that, that's when you got to have the hard conversations and try to go away from it.
Let me add two things and then I'll let Dylan jump in. Like, I think what I was meant when I was trying to phrase this question, because it feels like when I'm saying, I feel like I'm attacking people because that's all anyone wants. And I'm not trying to do that. But like when I was hearing you talk, you're like, oh, yeah, we may do that, but we're going to have these two other sessions during the week. And I think what we think is this is the important, like when we do that 10 by K, that's where we're getting better. And what they think is, I don't really know why we did that, but now I got to do the 20 and that's the important part. And what I'm trying to get at, or us as coaches, we're trying to get across is like, if you're going to mentally be locked into a session, that 10 by K or this 6 by mile or, or the marathon pace specific ones, that's where you get better. I don't ever see someone's 20 miler and be like, oh man, this guy's ready. But when we do, 2 by 5 mile or the 4:10:4 session Dylan was talking about, when someone rocks that, I'm like, okay, this guy's fit. But I get nothing out of watching when I see someone run a 21. There's no confidence. There's no like, oh yeah, I know what this person is capable of. And so I think that's the message I'm trying to get across. Like like you said, it's going to probably be a part of the cycle, and it can be good. It's a safe way to practice fueling and getting that time on feet, but it's not like where I'm deriving confidence or I think a super integral part of the training process. Dylan, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you guys. I think the further your marathon pace gets from like your easy run, so like a lot of people, some people might have like their easy runs and their marathon pace might be pretty close, especially when you're first starting. You're just trying to finish a marathon. Those are like the less emphasis there is on these big long like runs, because it's a separation of specificity as well. So like I think when we talk about these kind of workouts, it's, is it specific to the goal that we're chasing? And when you're going out and running 20 miles, for at 10-minute pace, and you're trying to run a marathon at 8-minute pace, just looking at that, you kind of scratch your head and think like, what is specific about this? And you're right, there is a lot of overemphasizing of the long run, and people can tend to fall in line with thinking that, yeah, the speed workout that I did on Tuesday or Friday is one thing, but like people love the long run. People love going out and spending a ton of time, out there, just like the grind of it all. I mean, I've done that too. I sent you guys a photo from when I was in college. And like I was very proud of this long run that I did. It was like, this is the best long run I've ever done. Like I crushed it. It was hard, this whole thing. It was the most mileage that I've ever run in a day at that point. But I was training for a 10K. So it's like, what is 18 miles at 550 pace? What does that do for my 10K that I was trying to run at 450 pace? It doesn't really have the same relationship. So I'm in agreement with you guys. And I will say that on my end, the way that I will tend to shape this in training is that I take a kind of a high-low approach. So once we get into the part of marathon training to where, hey, we're focusing more on the marathon specific long runs, we'll do like a week where we have a longer long run, and then we'll have a week where we do a shorter long run. And so I kind of do these alternations
Are
between like, hey,
those like the shorter and longer? What's the quality distribution in those? Or are they both just easy?
typically once we get to that point of training, like where you are able to tolerate a certain amount of running without it like killing you. For some people, like running 20 miles might as well be a race. Like it's hard just to cover that distance. I think we can all. What's that?
I think that is a lot of my point too, is that like we have athletes that isn't hard for, but there's some people that I know they can do it, but it is really hard. So it kind of feels like, why did we waste that shot? Like you can do this, but it's a big tax on you. And I don't know how, it just feels wasteful to have all that soreness because I know we could already do it.
I think it falls into, and I'll use myself as an example again, I think it falls down to insecurity, like feeling as though that we have to prove ourselves in training. And when we go into that with that mindset, we completely lose track of like the specific goal. All we want to do is prove to ourselves that we can do it. And that's why a lot of times we'll chase these big volume days. But
maybe that's us on coaches of like not explaining that, like, oh, if we did 8 by a threshold mile, 3-mile warm up, cool down, whatever, that's 14, 15, 16 miles, depending on rest and stuff.
Yeah.
That is more, that will get you ready better than the slow 20. But, like maybe that's something we got to improve on, explaining why does threshold get you better prepared for the marathon than running 2-3 minutes slower than marathon pace, which is not specific.
I think people are generally pretty receptive to it as well. I think it's also important to feed into what people like to do as well. Like if someone wants to go out and they're like, hey, I have a group running 20 or 21 miles this weekend, like I'm usually not going to tell them no, because it's much better than they're going to be able to go run with someone than not. However, the issue is when you get to the point where I had a 12-mile run for them and they go run 20, and then that sacrifices the week afterwards, right? There's always a balance to it. But yeah, in general, like in an ideal scenario, I don't give a long run, like 18, 20, 22 miles every week. When we're really training, I like to alternate. Usually the higher volume days tend to be the higher intensity days too. So we kind of hit 2 birds in 1 stone there and really put the specificity where it needs to be. And then on the other week, might have a week where the long run might be 12, might be 14, could be 16 for some people, but it's shorter, because I don't think that you have to do a long run every week. I don't think that's a
100%
requirement to
agree.
any training plan. Like you don't need to do a long run every week. It just has become this habitual thing that, runners feel like, oh, on the weekends I go and run, X amount of miles. But sometimes you kind of have to step back and ask yourself, like, why do I do that? Do I do that just because I always do that? Or is there an actual reason?
100%. I think so many people, if they took that load distribution and took it out of the weekend and put it through the week and raised everything else up, that would be so much more performance enhancing for your training than, and I think that's again the emphasis of what I'm trying to make about this is like sometimes we see people who are so focused on that, it's like they're missing stuff, or the rest of the week is kind of whatever, and then it's just huge weight on the end. And all of our best running and a lot of the people we know has come from, like, we've had times where our long run is the shortest run or the shortest day because we double so much. It's like that in our best running, that isn't where our volume necessarily came from. It's having such a robust, consistent schedule throughout the week.
I think so. I'm thinking back to some of our own training in the past, particularly in Flagstaff, and in defense of the long run here, or the weekly long run, I feel like some of the times that I felt the meanest as a racer were the times that we did like A1 loop 5 times in a cycle. And the most of those A1 loops aren't just like little easy jaunts out there. It's A1 loop. Preface this: it's a 21-mile lollipop run in Flagstaff. It's got about 1,200 feet of elevation gain across
Up
the
to
whole thing.
8,000 feet.
It's enough.
Up to 8,000 feet. It's like gradually uphill for 7. It's kind of a rolling hilly for the middle 7 lollipop. You get a big climb right before 14, then you get this nice kind of gradual downhill, which is still feels challenging at the end of a 21 miler. It's just a hard run. It's kind of an iconic run in Flagstaff. But I feel like, so none of those runs, those were good long runs. They weren't structured long runs. It's not like we were out there doing workouts, but some of those just longer, harder efforts at like that moderate pace that didn't have that structure. I felt like there was just so much benefit from those runs. Like I always felt like coming off of those, like that was where I really got fit, more so than some of the workouts that maybe we were doing throughout the middle of the week. So, and I think like one place where I've been experimenting a little bit more recently is doing away with the easy long run and like, hey, let's do this moderate effort long run. Let's do this at 90 something percent of your marathon effort, and let's not go overboard with it. Let's make sure we're keeping it within a controlled statement here, but I don't want this to be a slog or a jog. I want this to be up tempo and a little bit harder, but not like your true marathon pace. Like we want to get through it, feel like you could do more, but feel like you got a really good effort out of it. So I feel like there's a sweet spot in here. And again, maybe I'm just basing this more on the type of athletes that I tend to work with who are in that sub 330 range, who can derive a lot of benefit from that. And so it's going to work for them maybe more than it's going to work for your 330 athlete. But I still think like there is something to gain from this non-specific long run. It's just a matter of how you schedule it, where it is in the program, and what you're doing before and after it.
I definitely agree with that. And I think, like you said, it's probably more on the faster person thing. You know, the faster you are, the more that makes sense. But that you mentioned like that kind of cycle of flip flopping, like 1 week, it's just a regular long run. Like sometimes I just say it by feel, you know. So like if it kind of gets rolling as long runs do, you rip the back half, like same way you would A1.
On
And
almost
then the
every long
next,
run I write, I'm like, hey, this can be progressive over the second half if you feel good. Like almost every easy long run's like, hey, this can be progressive if you're feeling good.
yes. And like when we lived in a place like Flagstaff, 90% of the long runs are uphill one way and downhill the second. So it kind of just like works out that way that you're going to rip a little bit. So that definitely makes sense. And I love that structure for people like that of 1 week like that. Because then if you don't feel good, you just jog that, you know. But then when you do, you rip. And then the next week more structured because like we don't need structure every week. Um, yeah, so I like that. But yeah, I think that becomes a little less effective the further you go out, but more so just again, like just that is not, like you said, that anxiety or being worried about that is not what's going to make you finish. And like, I don't think some people realize if we did 10 miles in strides, that sometimes would be a better use of our Saturday than puttering for 20, 21, 22 miles. For some people, you know, like you got to know the athlete. What are we struggling with? What's our next step? You know, if you've run a bunch of 18 milers already and you've run 20 marathons, like at 21 easy, it's not moving the needle for us anymore. Like it's going to be, our gains are going to come from somewhere else. And so, but yeah, some good points.
I think it's good to try to set your runners up so that they feel good on those long runs as well. Like, so like set them up so that they can do exactly what you guys said, where it's like, hey, if you feel good, like progress it through the back half, or like, hey, get after it today. But also trying to distinguish that you don't want to like, there's a difference between, you know, a steady or progressive effort than like, hey, let's go like test yourself and go run marathon pace. There's a difference there. And it's hard to explain that to people sometimes. You kind of have to experience it yourself, right? You have to go out there and get an understanding of what that feels like. And you also have to progress up to that. But I think it's our job as coaches to try to set our athletes up to where they get to that long run day and they feel good. They're not going into it feeling like they're already beat down. Like ideally, I'll try to separate workouts from long runs. So like if they're doing a long run on Sunday, I'm trying not to do anything fast on Saturday, because the last thing, I just don't, there's just not a lot of value in going and slogging out those miles. Like just mechanically, it's probably inefficient. Like you're just delaying recovery. Like the only thing you're doing is logging miles on a, you know, beaten up body. So I agree with you guys. And I definitely do the same thing. I actually use, uh, Nick, you mentioned 90% marathon pace. I kind of take my own spin on things, I guess. It's very similar to like a Canova-esque approach, but I don't call them fundamental runs, but I call them foundational runs, because I feel like it's something that helps lay the foundation for everything else that comes afterwards. And so I have 3 different steps for this. So I just call them foundational tempo 1, 2, 3, and they are basically paces based upon their marathon pace. So it could be 80, 85, 90%. And I like to scale one up before I move to the next. So eventually they get to the point to where, hey, you might be cranking out good volume at, you know, 90% of your marathon pace. And then it's like, hey, now we're kind of ready to start working in some of those longer marathon runs. And so it's just like this nice transition of getting into that rhythm of things. But yeah, setting your athletes up to where they feel good and they can actually take advantage of a good day versus, you know, almost forcing them to go out and just slog miles for miles sake.
100% for our mind's sake. I think, you know, this is a good transition and we've started touching on it, but, you know, we said last week we wanted to talk about spicing up the long run is how we said it. But, you know, ways that we're kind of talking about already, ways we incorporate things and why we put stuff in the long run. And yeah, what are best practices and favorite ways to do that? What do you guys have there?
So I think first it might be good to just talk about, let's just say if you're not training for a marathon. So, you know, it's easy for us to go and we talk about the marathon because that's most of our athletes that we coach. In general, I would say that we just talked about running faster long runs. For people who are training for 5K, 10K, half marathon, a lot of times the long runs are pretty quick. And you have a little extra energy from, maybe not having to dive as deep, and doing these long, just metabolically draining workouts during the week that, you on a Saturday or Sunday rolls up and you're feeling pretty good and you keep it honest. This is obviously not too different than what we just said, but like, I think sometimes it's good to add in, maybe some threshold reps at the end of a long run, or possibly even something faster. So like mile to 5K reps, 30, 45, 60 seconds. And the rationale here is that you kind of get your fast twitch muscle fibers like involved after they've already been pre-fatigued for 60, 90 plus minutes. I think this is a great adaptation process as well, just kind of getting more musculature involved under an already tired state. So I guess my example would be doing, let's just say, an hour easy, and then following up that with maybe 10 by 1 minute at roughly 5K pace with 3 to 4 minutes just easy jog recovery, so that you're just so you're accumulating a lot of volume, but now you're asking your body to kind of spice it up a little bit. Obviously the time frame there can be skewed, but in general, long recovery or long warm up period, then start throwing in something faster with a lot of rest.
Go ahead.
I'll go. Oh, let me say one thing, Nick. I don't have actually anything to add. But Dylan mentioned something about like 5K, miler, 10K. And I brought this up once, but that is one strange thing I see so many people doing, that people of training for anything outside of the marathon, people often just have long runs built into their plan for no reason. They're just doing long runs year round just to have them. And there's two numbers that I think it was a Wetmore quote a long time ago of like, your long run needs to be 25% of your weekly mileage. There is no science. There's no rhyme or reason. That is, I see it all the time on the internet and forums and stuff.
Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interject.
There's no reason. That's not a real thing. You don't need to do that in any way, shape, or form. And then the other number is kind of the maffetone thing. Like it's the 180 minus your heart rate. If you can forget those two things and wipe them from your brain, you will be a better runner. You don't need to run 25% on Sunday.
But also on that point as well, try not to make it so that like if you run, say you run like 4 days during the week, in general, I would really recommend that you didn't do like 3 miles for 3 days and then go run a 20-mile long run. Like ideally, I would prefer that you spread that out versus just, 3 miles, 3 miles, 3 miles, boom, this huge long run. If you're training and you really care about that, I think you'd be better off doing something different.
I got a hot take about that, but I want to hear how Nicole spices his long runs up.
I mean, it's really not all that different from how Dylan does it. I don't like to add like faster than, that 5K, 10K style work. I would prefer to add threshold. So if we're going to add something spicy, it's going to be like, we're going to do minutes, 15 by minute on, minute off, throw it in the middle, or we'll do 20 in sets of 10, something like that. I tend to separate my 5K, 10K stuff and do that earlier in the week. I like them doing that on fresher legs. I've never experimented with having them run that kind of stuff at the end of a long run, but I work with some high school athletes, and especially in the summer, I don't like them out there just slogging for 80 minutes. Like, hey, like every long run should be progressive. I want you finishing at 6-minute pace. I want you out there getting aggressive and running faster, because you running 8-minute pace for 10 miles isn't doing you much good for your 5K, cross race we have coming up. So especially in the summertime, let's be intentional with these kind of things. Always like to throw in like, hey, let's find a hilly course and let's work the ups, cruise the downs, do little things like that where we're being intentional about adding effort, but not maybe in a little bit of a less structured way. Just like, let's find some hills, let's run them, let's get some work in, but let's not focus on what your pace is or your heart rate. Like sometimes it's nice to not focus on that and just focus on your effort. So those would be the main ways that I'm going to have athletes spice up their long runs.
Yeah, I'll give some examples of some ones that I've done that I really liked. I think Dylan gave me this one time, but we did like a longer warm up, 4 or 5 miles. And then I swear we did like 10 or 12 200s. and then left the track, went and did like another run, like 10 miles, and then came back and did another set of 200s. So it didn't even feel like a long run. It was like an easy run 200, an easy run 200s again. But by the end of it was a ton of mileage. I don't know, 18 or something. So a very long day with a lot of safe speed built in. We kind of talked, I mean, we talked about me and Dylan doing the Canova minute on, minute off, really big session, like 30 of those, which when you're oscillating like that, you're always the timer's ticking down the whole time. So you're not really thinking about, oh, this is mile 14. You're just like, I'm on this rep and then you're on that rep. And so that's a cool way to kind of distract you. That gets a lot of volume. And then I think we all use different versions of, when we're doing marathon or half marathon stuff, of incorporating those type of paces into those long runs. Like one I use a lot is 2x5 mile, or we talked about the 2x10K where we're doing the Canova-style, switching off each K above and below marathon pace. We've talked before about 3x3 mile, those type of long run workouts that we would incorporate to get threshold or marathon paces in there. And then kind of like Dylan's 4:10:4, but we've also done, and I have an athlete doing one this weekend, so that's why it's on my mind, but like a fast finish long run, so whatever it is, often I think a lot of people do in like the last 4 miles or 3 or something around there, so maybe you do 16 miles, but then the last 4 from there to 20, it's like tempo hard effort, like marathon faster, seeing how hard you can close down on, being a little fatigued later in the race. Yeah, stuff like that's really fun, because on those, fueling super important, because if you didn't fuel up to that point, it's gonna be really hard to turn it on, running on tired legs. But then kind of keeps you a little engaged and focused, and using some different muscle groups, very, very effective and helpful. So
There's a Canova one I really like. It's like, you do 6 miles easy, 6 miles at marathon pace, then a 10 by minute on, minute off, and then you rest and you come back and do another mile or 2 at threshold. Like, I like that because you're constantly changing the paces a little bit, and you always have something so you're focusing on your 6 miles, but it's not like it's a 10-mile tempo. You get a little break, then it's a minute on, minute off. That goes by quick. And then it's like, oh, I just have another 2 miles at T pace to just kind of really grind this out and finish it up. Like, I love like a really blended session like that for a longer. I think it's a lot of fun.
I think a lot of people would agree with you too. I mean, all my athletes love when they have something structured within the long run. It kind of combines the two things that they love the most, right? They love running fast and they love running for a long time. So I think, and it really checks our boxes too, when we say like, hey, we don't like to prescribe too many long runs where you're just like slogging along. Like, we try to prevent that as much as possible. So then we include quality. So it's kind of, we meet, they're feeling really good about it because they're getting a really good and purposeful and intention, focused session. And then they're also getting a really long run in. So like, I think I don't have any athlete who complains about it. I think most people are like, they're excited about it. Like, they love those minute on, minute off workouts. They love doing the hard workouts in the long run, because there's nothing better than feeling like, man, I just ran a long time and I just did that really fast too. Like, that's just like the best feeling in the sport of running. I mean, in my eyes.
And I think for a lot of adult, I was going to say professionals who are athletes, people who have jobs, full-time families, the whole deal, like you're not able to like have that professional lifestyle where you do 2 workouts on Tuesday, Friday, then a big long run on the weekend, and you come back and do that over and over again. So we're spreading things out a little bit more, so that Tuesday, Wednesday session is important. And then that weekend session, whether it's on Saturday or Sunday, if it's a long run, we want to get as much out of that as possible. Like, we don't want to just kind of dilly-dally around and get little stimulus like that. That's opportunity to get a really good adaptation and stimulus going. So I feel like for a lot of those athletes, like it's got to be like a main focus, and we have to find different ways to play with it and make it interesting and get as much out of that day as possible. Because if we're just kind of going out and slogging for 90 minutes on Sunday and you do a session on Tuesday or Wednesday, like, you're leaving things on the table there. Like, you could be getting better.
Dude, and this is super true for the trails, but also on the roads. And I've messed this up several times, but if you've never practiced your fueling while running marathon pace, you might be in for a world of hurt. Like you'd be amazed how many people are like, I couldn't get the thing open. And like, it's so that difference of like, oh, I was running 9-minute pace and then I went to try to BQ at 640 and I'd never taken a gel while running that hard. It's like, those are things you need to practice and figure out. And your stomach is different. Like more blood is being pulled away. And like, those are really important things to practice in all endurance events at fueling at race pace.
I've got a couple long run questions for you guys. Maybe just like your take on this. So like the first one is, all right, let's just say we'll just take the marathon because it's easy. And we know the most about the marathon and feel like. Let's just say you have the big long run that you give people. Let's just say that's anywhere from 16 to 22 miles, wherever it is. How many times like do you need to do that? How many times do you need to run 16 to 22 miles until you need to do another one again to get the benefit from it? That's my first question. So like, for example, let's just say I ran the first week of the month, I ran 20 miles. You know, at what point do I need to get another stress of, hey, I need to go run 20 miles again? You know, how many weeks can I go between long runs before I start to lose the benefit of the long run? And then
Are you going to ask the second question?
I can. You guys can answer that. If you guys want to answer this one first, and then I can ask the second one.
Nick, you go ahead.
I don't even know how to fucking answer that question, to be honest. Like, I mean, I think like, I mean, if we're going to get down to brass tacks, like if you go 4 weeks of, you know, no running or no long runs and just kind of easy running, like, yeah, maybe you're probably losing it. But I was just pulling up one of my athletes' calendar, and we're doing between 16 and 20, I don't know, like in the bulk of our marathon build 5 weeks in a row. Like we're not really taking a week off there on that stuff. And not all of those are quality sessions necessarily or like really intense, but we're getting the stimulus, we're getting the dosage there. So for my marathon athletes, like it's not a question I ask because it's not something we explore. Like we're going to do our long runs. Maybe there's a week gap between one long run or two. And if I have an athlete who's injured and maybe they miss, 2 weeks, so they have to take 2 weeks off and then a week down, like I still don't feel like they've lost a lot of fitness there. And I don't feel like that gap has maybe it affected their confidence, but I don't feel like missing 3 long runs there is necessarily a make or break, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm going to go. How many weeks can you go in between long runs before something bad happens, you lose fitness? I'm going to say infinity. Like that example of 16 to 20, like say I had an athlete who never ran more than 15. What if they're running 15 every day? That's a 95-mile week. Or 105, sorry. 105-mile week. So is that person unfit? Is that person not ready to race a marathon? I wouldn't think so. I mean, homeostasis wise, 15 miles is a walk in the park for them. And if they're working with me, we obviously have a ton of threshold and, good speed built in there. And so, I mean, that's kind of my whole point. I just don't get any fitness confidence. Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. We do that, but it's just not and research wise, like what research are we relying on like that says 18 easy is, or take our examples of quality. Like, so say we have any of those workouts integrated in there. Well, the difference between doing that when it's 14 versus 18 miles is like the warm up and cool down, right? Like, so is that the part where we got fit because we cooled down 6 miles instead of 2? So, like we said, the adaptation is nice, but it's just, I don't find it like an integral part. So how many weeks can you go in between without something bad happen? I feel like a lot. If the rest of your training is robust and well thought out.
Yeah, I only asked the question because a lot of times when I write training, it varies a lot. So like every week is different from the next, right? We're not doing the same long run every weekend. And every once in a while, I'll get, the question of like, hey, we did 16 or we did 18 this week. How come we're not doing 18 again this week? Or how come we're not doing 20 again this week? Because naturally, people want to be able to do a little bit more, a little bit more. And so if I program 20 for one weekend and the next weekend says 14, the natural reaction to that is like, hey, why are we not doing that again? And my response is that, hey, we don't need it. We hit the 20, like we don't need to continue hitting the same stress. We got to do something different to get the body to react differently. And so the reason why I asked is like, how many weeks do you go in between having that bigger long run in general? And you guys obviously answered that well. Because I think it's just a frequent question that I get from a lot of my runners.
Yeah. And I mean, the reason is because it's incredibly hard and takes years to really improve the threshold system, which we're going to race at, to a higher level where it is insanely easy to improve the ability to run easy to, longer durations. And so, we don't want to waste a lot of training load and stimulus on something that's very easy to manipulate, where, like I said, it takes years to really get a big jump in threshold. And so we're just going to save.
I've been trying to tell people or explain it in the way that like, hey, mileage is kind of like the background music. It's like you got to have it. It's a part of the song, but it's not the main part of the song. It's not the song that like you're really like the chorus is like that's your intervals, that's your specific work. It's the volume, it's the background music over time. That's the stuff that's building in the background. It's important, but like it's not important, right now. It's something that is accumulated over time.
And I think we're three guys that all got to the point where we stopped getting a bump from that anymore. Like I think all of us at some point have hit a point where like, okay, if I go from 100 to 120 or 120, 140, that's not going to make the difference versus me making a threshold jump.
Yeah. My second question was, when we're doing long run workouts, typically when you guys are right in your training, how often do you prescribe them?
I mean, in a marathon build, it's almost weekly. We're not, like I said earlier, I have a couple long runs in there that aren't specific or don't have a lot of intensity built in there. But in the bulk of the training, like every long run has intention and a purpose, and so we're doing it almost weekly. Like I'd rather, for most of my athletes, do a bigger, more specific long run on Sunday, come back, do something moderate Tuesday, and then come back and do another specific long run the following week in our marathon builds. I just feel like they're going to get more out of that. And then we've laid the groundwork early on when we're doing our big intervals and threshold sessions, where this is now our time to focus on the specificity of it.
It's probably every 2 out of 3 weeks, I think. Sometimes more, but maybe 3 out of 4, where like this is a more of a structured long run, and then maybe every third or fourth will be easy, or like, if we have a race, that's where that's built in there. But the vast majority. What about you?
Yeah, once we get into the marathon phase, almost every week. Every once in a while, I'll throw like a really big long run in there for some people that I just keep as easy and put notes in, like, hey, like if you can run this relatively steady, or I'll give them a pace. I'll assign one of the tempo 1, 2, 3s for them. But yeah, most of the time it's every week, unless I'm feeling like we need a down week. And in that case, we'll focus on the intensity during the week and then just keep the long run pretty